Welcome to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for Today's World, the podcast for parents who want to connect with their teens in a meaningful way, including the most difficult times. I am so excited to have Katie K. May with us today, the therapist, author, and founder of Creative Healing. Katie works with teens who are struggling with intense emotions and self-destructive behaviors, and she helps parents navigate these moments with insight, calm, and skill. Her book, You're on Fire, It's Fine, is full of practical strategies for validating your teen, managing your own reactions, and rebuilding trust and connection at home. And I want to start with a trigger warning. Today's conversation includes topics like teen self-harm and emotional crisis. And if you feel these subjects may be distressing, please take care of yourself and consider stepping away, pausing, or listening later for your own wellness. Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Cheryl, I'm so excited to be here today. I love talking about teens, parenting them, and I know I'm in the right place to do that.
You sure are. And let's talk about first, what is your mission? Why are you here? What's happening with Katie?
Yeah, so my starting point is always that I struggled as a teen. I was a self-destructive teenager. I was raised by a single father who did not have the skills to parent in general. He was thrown into it, let alone parent a highly emotional, reactive teen like me. And so later in life, he talked about how there was no parenting manual for kids like me. And I am a therapist. I specialize in working with high-risk teens and their parents. And I decided that I was going to write that manual. I was going to write the book for parenting teens like me because that is my mission, to shorten the struggle for those who come up behind me so they don't have to go through what I did to get to the other side.
I love that. And the title of the book, You're on Fire, It's Fine. I want to know first the metaphor there, who's on fire? Parents are on fire, teens are on fire, everyone's burnt. Who's on fire? And what is the point of that title? Because I think it's so significant.
Well, I think any of us could make the argument that we are the one that is on fire. So I will validate that if you are the parent and you feel that way, yes, that makes sense. And the intention of the title was to discuss this idea that a biologically sensitive teenager, someone who is born with a predisposition to feel their emotions in big ways, it often feels like they're on fire with their emotions when they experience them. I term them fire feelers in my book. And so the title conveys this idea that when you're on fire with your emotions, it's often the unintentional invalidation of the people around you. They're trying to help, they're trying to move you through it. So they're saying things like, you're fine, go take a walk, maybe get a snack, you're fine, everything's fine. And so that is the idea behind the title is fire feeler, big, overwhelming emotions, caregiver telling them everything's okay, but it's not necessarily helping in those moments.
Oh, that's so good. And when we talk about self-harm and talk about high risk or risky behaviors, what is that?
I use the term self-destructive behaviors or high-risk behaviors so that it's all encompassing of any of these behaviors that stem from the big and overwhelming emotion. So if we go back to this concept that you are on fire with your emotions, it's all consuming, it's burning you up inside. So when we can understand that visual, that feeling, then it makes sense that your brain comes up with a strategy to make that fire go out quickly. So for a lot of people, this is an escape behavior like self-harm or suicidal behaviors. For some people, it's more of a numbing behavior like substance use, binging, endlessly scrolling social media or numbing out in front of the television. And so the behavior, while we see it as a problem because it's problematic and it's destructive, is actually a solution for this underlying emotion.
So, and I want to identify, I think there's a misconception around self-harm and intention to end your life. Can you define that? Because I think that really gets tossed around. And I think sometimes, in the high school system, when teachers noticed that kids were harming themselves, and specifically cutting, that they were attempting, and they actually were not attempting. So can you define that for us so we get that out of the misconception out of the way?
Thank you for clarifying that. I would say that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions outside of the behavioral health community is that non-suicidal self-injury and suicidal behaviors are the same thing. And if we're looking at a Venn diagram, I would say there's some overlap in terms of harm. However, they are different. And so some things to think about is that I have had clients who self-harm as a way to block suicidal ideation or block suicidal behaviors, meaning my emotions are escalating. This is a tool, harmful, unhelpful tool, but this is a tool that I'm using to make my emotions go down quickly so that I don't act on more dangerous urges. For a lot of folks, the mechanism behind it is the same. It's a way to regulate your emotions. It's a way to escape, but they are not the same thing. I also think it's important to understand that if someone is self-harming or cutting, they are more likely to engage in suicidal behaviors in the future because it's an issue of tolerance. The same way as if you take Tylenol every day, it might not work as well to get rid of your headache, so you might need to try something a little stronger, but they're certainly not the same behavior.
So if a parent now has noticed, but it's been brought to their attention either by a teacher or a friend, or they've noticed themselves that their teen is self-harming, or involved in high-risk behaviors, what is their very first, I'm not going to say reaction because we don't want to react, what is their very first step?
Yeah, I'm glad you said reaction because I typically do have to talk about reaction to talk about the next. And there are 3 ways that I encourage support people to be mindful as they're entering into this conversation. So noticing their tone, their face, and their pace. Their tone being, how am I talking about this? Am I talking about it in a way that I am calm? I'm conveying that I'm able to hold the information. I'm not super freaked out. I'm not crumbling on the outside, even though as a parent, of course you are on the inside.
Yeah.
What does my face look like? Am I, again, staying regulated? Am I showing concern without being over concerned in a way that a teen might feel like, mom's so upset, I can't hurt her like this. I can't tell her this information. And then what is my pace? Am I rushing in frantically to solve, or am I slowing down and trying to understand? So we really have to work on those pieces as support people, whether we're therapists, parents, counselors, teachers, because saying to an adult, I want to hurt myself, I am hurting myself, I'm thinking about suicide, it's big, it's scary, it often brings up a lot of shame. And so the adult in front of you needs to be conveying, I can handle this information, even though you're hurting and that hurts me, I am here for you and I'm not centering my feelings in the situation. So once you've nailed tone, face, pace, then we're observing and describing. I've noticed that, or I noticed that you had a mark on your arm. I'm not mad. I'm here to support you. What's going on? I'm a big fan of direct communication and transparency. I think when we try and dance around the issue, it gets convoluted. Teenagers implicitly get the message that you're not comfortable talking about it because you can't even say the word. So we just need to be clear. We need to say what we're seeing and share our concern without overreacting in a way that makes teens fearful of sharing more.
Yeah. And even in the questions, I mean, back up that they haven't seen evidence of or noticed it, but they think maybe.
Mm-hmm.
What is the question? I mean, what is the point blank honest question we're asking our teens?
Yeah. Well, so I train a lot of therapists. And one thing that I will say is if you want to work with depressed teenagers, you are working with self-harm and suicide, whether you chose to or not, because it is one of the symptoms. It's a collection in those symptoms of how we look at depression. So for a teenager, if we're noticing that they have a low mood, if we're suspecting that they're hurting themselves, and this is parent perspective now, it would be okay to say, a lot of times when teenagers are feeling badly, when they're depressed, when they're sad a lot, thoughts to hurt themselves might come into their mind. They may have thoughts of suicide. They may have thought about or tried self-harm. I want you to know that if that is you, you can tell me. It will not freak me out. I'm here to listen. Is that going on for you, or what's on your mind about that?
Yeah, I love the honest, direct. There's no point in beating around the bush. There really isn't. You want a clear, and then you you're always looking for that clear answer back. So I think if you're mirroring that, it makes sense. So I want to talk about judgment.
Mhm.
And there's two ways that this presents itself. Parents who are judging their kids in what they're actually doing and how they're doing it. And then I think there's probably a huge judgment against ourselves as parents, thinking, what the hell? What's happened? What did I do? Where did I go wrong? Like that whole, how do we switch that up? How do we redirect this judgment?
Mhm. I always say that judgments are the fuel to the emotional fire. So they really take us out of our present experience of emotions, and they either blame or shame. I call it the blame and shame continuum, just like you described, Cheryl. So on one end, we're blaming the teen. Get it together. Why can't you use your coping skills? I've been paying for therapy for a year. You're not better yet. Or there's this feeling of shame. Where did I go wrong? I failed as a parent. I'm not the right parent for this teen. I can't do this. But on either end of that spectrum, it's actually avoiding the true problem, which is this, what I want to say is grief. This grief of our experience in parenting. I have felt it as a parent. I have felt it in different areas of my life. And I know the parents that I support do as well, because we talk about it regularly, is that when you're parenting a child or teenager with mental health concerns, it's not what you imagined your life would look like. You didn't hold your baby in your arms and think, oh, my child's going to hurt themselves one day. Like you didn't prepare for this. You didn't plan for it or imagine it. So when you find yourself in the midst of it and it's hard and you feel helpless, and every day brings some unpredictability of how things will play out, it sucks. It's sad. It's not the life that you imagined. And yet it's the life that you have. So when we stop blaming, when we stop shaming, what we're actually left with is grief and having to sit with our own sadness about the reality of what life is. And that's the true target to process, but it's really hard and it requires support.
So what would, if a parent's listening and they're wondering, am I judging? What does it actually sound like when they're judging their kids and when they're judging themselves? Like, what are the words that might, do you know what I mean?
There are some buckets that I would say it falls into. So one is our shoulds. You should be better by now. I should be able to handle this without reacting to my teen. There's the all or nothing. It's never going to get better. Nobody likes me. My teen hates me. So any of those extremes in thinking. And then there's one of the sneakier ones is personalization. And this is the one that I see often from the parent side of things, is they're doing this on purpose to upset me. They're being manipulative. They're just attention seeking. So those are more of the judgments that are about the teen's behavior as being intentional, as being sneaky, manipulative, attention seeking. They're the three big ones that I see or I hear a lot in my work, but it really gets in the way of healing.
So speak to that. Speak to what is that? Like how, what am I trying to say? What is the opposite of that? Like if they're not trying to manipulate, if they're not trying to seek attention, what is it they're trying to do?
Yeah, so I think it's really tricky because there's some kernel of truth to that, but not in a malicious way. So if we go back to this idea that a teenager is on fire with their emotions, and in order to make that fire go down, they engage in an impulsive behavior, right? So let's use the example of self-harm. Teenagers on fire with emotions, self-harm makes the fire go down, but there's a double stack. There's a second part to that. Not only does it immediately help them regulate their emotions, then they're receiving social support and warmth around that. So I'll see parents that will come upstairs and sit on the bed next to them, bring them ice cream, call them out of school the next day, tell them they don't have to do their homework or do their chores. So they're stacking on these reinforcers, this warmth. They're the ones that are doing this. And then over time, they start to feel frustrated or resentful and say, oh, they're doing it again to get out of school tomorrow. But that was the that was the setup that was happening all along. So what I suggest is not that we've removed warmth, not that we've removed these things, but we move them. We move them to more consistent and regular intervals. So if your teen only gets warmth, attention, or removal of demands after they self-harm, of course, that's going to happen again. That's basic behaviorism. Something that gets reinforced continues to happen. It's like when you give your dog scraps at the table, they're going to keep coming back to the table for scraps.
Yeah.
And so, but if instead you're consistently giving your kid warmth, you're consistently telling them you're proud of them, you're noticing when they had a hard day that's not at a crisis point and saying, you know what, you don't have to pick up your socks today, I'll do that for you. Then we are giving them these structured intervals of our attention, our warmth. And then it's not a reactive behavior.
So good. So I would love to know then, it's almost backpedaling, but what causes this? What is happening with our kids that causes them to really feel the need to do this self-harm and high-risk behavior?
Yeah, so there's a theory behind it. It's called the biosocial theory, and it comes in these two parts. So on one hand, we have this biologically sensitive child. I tell parents, you have some kids that are born naturally good at sports. You have some kids that are born naturally good at art, and you have some kids that are born naturally good at emotions. They're just more attuned to their emotions. They feel them more deeply. This is how they were born. It's a biological predisposition. But if you have one of these fire feelers and they're born into a family that only has sports players and artists or other children, so they have no language to parent this child effectively, they're going to unintentionally invalidate this child. They're going to tell them things like, you're too sensitive. I was just joking. It's not a big deal. They're going to oversimplify solutions. They're going to say things like, just take a walk, go get a snack, take a nap. You'll feel better when you wake up. Which again, like if you have these big emotions, they don't go away quickly. There isn't a simple solution. Or they're going to not acknowledge lower levels of emotion until they get to crisis. I saw this a lot when I worked at the hospital, behavioral health hospital, where at lower levels, teens would say things like, I'm struggling, I'm sad. And parents would say, all teenagers are moody. I was hormonal when I was your age. And so parents didn't, quote unquote, hear the behavior until it got to a crisis. So teens learned big behaviors get my needs met.
Yeah.
So when we have these two sides, the biologically sensitive child and the invalidating environment, and again and again and again over time, they're interacting, what happens is the teenager starts to lose trust in their own emotional experience. They start thinking like, am I too sensitive? Do I have the wrong emotions? Is my meter faulty? Do I really not understand how I feel? Do other people really have ways to fix this more easily? So there must be something wrong with me. And so anytime an emotion comes up, their brain goes, nope, not today. That's not okay to feel. And it comes up with a strategy to make it go away, which those quick strategies are often the self-destructive ones.
You talk in the book a lot about validation. And I want to ask a question about how do we validate our kids' feelings in these situations without condoning what they're doing?
Yeah. I think that's the biggest question I get from parents as well. Like, if I validate this, one, will I make it worse because I'm acknowledging it? And two, am I conveying that I condone this behavior? So we really want to separate emotion and behavior in this situation. We can validate, I'll use a lighter example. We can validate, I understand why you'd want to stay out until 2 a.m. However, our family rule is you have to be home at midnight. So I'll see you at midnight. So I totally get why you wouldn't want to be left out and you will have FOMO. But I'll see you at midnight. I expect you home then. And the same thing is true for self-harm behaviors. And I like to say, let's understand so clearly how teenagers got to the point of self-destruction that it feels like we're walking in their shoes, that we can say like, oh, you know what? I do get how that was a solution that your brain came up with. So the way that we validate without condoning is to understand how they got there and what their experience is. So we're being present. I'm looking, if you were my teen, I'm looking at you, I'm listening. You're telling me that you're hurting and that you self-harmed. So my first step might be to say, thank you for trusting me. I really want to reinforce that my teen trusted me with this information. And then I might say something like, seems like you were really hurting or you were really sad if that's the strategy your brain came up with to solve it or to cope with it. So you want to dig deeper than the behavior to understand the emotion underlying it.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So tell me, with your dad, what do you wish your dad had done? Like, what would have been the turning point for you growing up that you didn't get from your dad that you wish you had have got from your dad?
Yeah, it's the same thing that I still want from my family today. So I'll say at least it's consistent, if nothing else. I needed somebody to acknowledge my pain. I was a teenager growing up without a mom. And in my family, nobody ever talked about the fact that I had a mom and then one day my mom wasn't there anymore. And so I had all of these behaviors of a teenager who was struggling with trying to cope with this existence where nobody was talking about the thing that was this big, incredibly painful thing for me. And they kept just moving on with life. And so what I wish that my dad had done was validate that experience for me of, I know how hard this is for you. I know that you feel rejected. I know that you feel lonely. I don't have a solution. There's no way for any of us to fix this. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to fix this for you. I'm not trying to shut you down, but I see how hard this is for you. I see how much pain that you're in.
Yeah. Oh, kind of want to let that land. So if parents now are in the middle of this, mm-hmm. I feel like constant crisis mode. How, first of all, I guess it's a two-part question. How are parents self-regulating this? How are they kind of differentiating between, I'm going to keep my eye on her, or mm-hmm. she's never getting out of my sight again, and where every reaction is an overreaction because you're just in crisis mode. And I can totally understand that.
Yeah. So I kind of want to separate out some of the pieces that you're talking about, because I think that there is this piece that is, how do parents self-regulate? And then there's also some of what you're speaking to is the parent trauma response when they have a child who's engaging in self-harm behaviors. Yeah. Where do you want me to go?
Yeah, go trauma response first.
Okay. Yeah. So that is something that I don't think is talked about enough. When you have a child who has engaged in self-harm, when you have a child who has suicidal behaviors, I have seen regularly in my work that parents experience a trauma response. So if we look at what the criteria is for a traumatic response or PTSD, I'll say post-traumatic stress, not necessarily disorder. We look at, has there been a life-threatening incident? So suicide attempt, absolutely. Self-harm, maybe we have the misinterpretation or misconception that it is, and so our body is reacting that way. And then, do I have intrusive thoughts or images of this event? Absolutely. Even if you didn't see it, every time you call your teen and they don't answer your phone, are you imagining the worst case scenario of where they are and what's happening? Are you on high alert? Are you hypervigilant? Are you constantly scanning to make sure that your teen is safe? Are you checking on them multiple times a day if they're in their room? Yes, absolutely. So we're seeing a lot of the response that is similar to post-traumatic stress. Are you also potentially avoiding situations that might further trigger? Are you not pushing your teen because you're worried that every small thing is going to push them toward suicidal behavior? So this is why it's so important to include parents in treatment when a teen is engaging in self-harm or suicidal behaviors, because they are a part of that system and they've also been impacted. So they need to work through their own emotional responses as well as learn skills for how to respond to their teen.
That's so good. Yeah. And that was one of my next questions is, okay, so where does the parent get into getting some help as well? And is it in two different arenas, like family help, family therapy, and then solo parent therapy? Like, is it all helpful? Is it all necessary?
I would say any kind of seeking support is helpful. My specific recommendations, and this is how we do it at my centers, is parents get skills So that's one piece. Parents need the skills to do all the things that we're talking about, validate their teen, learn how to reinforce healthy behaviors, learn how to not reinforce things we don't want to see anymore, learning how to know how we feel and what happens when you escalate so that you're not accidentally escalating the situation yourself. So that is one piece. That is the learning how to support your teen, but also model the skills so that you have a home environment that is validating, that is ready for the changes that your teen is making. The other part of that is that I do believe that one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your child is to do your own work in therapy. And I think there's multiple reasons for this. I am a therapist and I go to therapy, and I will say that unpacking my family of origin, how I was parented, and processing the big emotions and unmet needs around that has made me a way better parent because I'm not repeating patterns. I'm also not overcorrecting patterns. So an example I give a lot is that I grew up in an invalidating environment. And so when I had a child, I was so worried about invalidating them that I kind of like didn't set limits on things because I was afraid it was going to invalidate them. So I went too far in the other direction. Yeah. And that was an overcorrection that came from my own stuff that once I processed, I was able to show up as a more whole parent.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Again, makes so much sense. So in the book, you talk about watching the building burn. What is that? It's such a striking image. Even when I just first looked at that, I think it's actually the name of a chapter. Yeah. And as soon as I read the title of the chapter, I was like, oh, this is like, I don't know who helped you or if you like titled it yourself, but it was so visual for me. It was like a visceral reaction. Can you explain like, what is that?
Yeah. So there are multiple pieces that I might attribute to watching the building burn, but I think that understanding as a parent that you have absolutely no control, that you are going to watch everything play out in front of you, and you only have control over your own responses. You also, through the teenage years, are going to ebb and flow in your relationship with your teen, the trust and closeness you have with your teen, and you're going to grieve letting go of a lot. For any parent, not just the parent of a self-destructive behavior, but any parent who once had a child who relied on them for everything and then now has a teenager who doesn't want them around a lot. There's grief that comes with that.
For your self-esteem.
What it requires is for you to become someone new, right? So I have an almost 18-year-old and they will be going to college next year. That will require me to become someone new. I will then be an empty nester. I will have a different relationship with my teenager than I did when they were in their teen years or their middle school years, right? So every new age that our child becomes forces us to become someone new. So we're watching buildings burn all the time, but then we're rebuilding them.
Yeah. And out of the ashes rises the phoenix. I love
there
that.
We go.
So I guess I want to ask too then, once the fire is out, what are the parents doing next? Like, how do you move forward from this type of crisis?
Yeah, so I'll walk you through the process. We start with understanding why there is a fire, how the fire started. Then as parents, we are recognizing, how do I feel? How do I notice my feelings? How do I name my feelings? How do I manage my feelings? So once we have all the self pieces in place, then we move into validation. Then we move into behavior change, and grieving. Then we can work on rebuilding the relationship, whatever that looks like for that teen and for that parent. And I call it my hierarchy of connection because I always like to make sure that families know we can't go from 0 to 100. We can't go from no relationship, difficult relationship, strained relationship to good relationship. Yeah. We have to go in steps. So the first step is being able to be in the same room as your teenager without it turning into conflict or criticism or tension. And this might look like, in my house, it would be me putting groceries away while my teen is sitting on the couch watching YouTube videos. We're in the same room, but I'm not saying, hey, did you do your homework? Hey, what do you have going on tomorrow? So I'm not being the manager, I'm just being present and they're just being present. And if we can accomplish that, then we can move on to side-by-side activities. Maybe it's watching a show together. Maybe it's driving in the car, listening to music. Once again, don't be the manager, don't be the criticizer. Once we can accomplish that without conflict, then we can move on to more interactive activities like having a conversation, building trust in talking about difficult topics. But we can't expect that if we've never done that, that we're going to be able to do that easily, or if there's been some kind of rupture, that it will be easy to get back to. We have to dip our toe in and take it step by step.
Yeah. And I just want to backtrack one question.
Yeah.
When is the parent going, oh my God, we need immediate crisis help? Or, okay, this is the next step. We'll go get some help. We'll have a conversation. Where's that divider where the parent goes, no, I'm calling, I'm making a call, whatever.
Yeah. So there's different answers that I have to this. My first response is, if your teen is engaging in any kind of self-destructive behavior, it's time to be in therapy. So I wouldn't wait. I wouldn't say if your teen is cutting, if your teen has suicidal thoughts, if your teen is engaging in any kind of disordered eating or substance use, it's time to be in therapy. That's not something to handle on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other piece of that is, and this is a question I get from a lot of parents, what's typical and what's cause for concern? Because teens are moodier. Teens are more irritable. They do spend more time in their room.
Yes.
And so my metric is usually duration, intensity, frequency. So how long has it been happening? How intense is it? Like, how life disrupting is it? And how frequently is it happening? We'll use the example of school avoidance, because that's one that we dealt with in my house. So if every once in a while your teen doesn't go to school and needs a mental health day, I don't know, maybe they could be in therapy. I think everyone could benefit from therapy, but I wouldn't say that yes, you definitely need to be in therapy. If your teen misses 2 days, 1 week, 1 day the next week, then we're seeing a pattern. So we really want to pay attention to, has this been happening in a patterned way for at least 2 weeks? And if so, let's get them into therapy before it becomes a crisis, because I believe that we can head off a lot of these crises by getting into treatment sooner. I don't want to wait for the crisis to happen.
Yeah. So what was the turning point for you? Like, when did you go, okay, I'm on the path now? Yeah.
Well, I was a teen who self-harmed, and then I became a late teen and young adult who used a lot of substances. So by the time I graduated college, I had a dangerous drug addiction, despite being very functional, had a full-time job and a 3.86 GPA. I was doing great by everyone else's standards. And then a surprise pregnancy at 26 really was the turning point for me. It was the moment when I recognized that if I was planning to bring a child into the world, that I needed to break the generational chains of dysfunction that I had been raised up into, that I needed to heal myself so that I could be whole for my child, so that I could give them a life that was different than the one that I had. So I don't suggest that everyone get pregnant to change their lives, but it was
Thank God you said that.
I think what it comes down to is having a life worth living that is bigger than the pain inside you, because that's what it was for me. It was that there's something bigger, there's something more important than continuing on this path of pain. So again, it doesn't have to be the same thing for everyone, but maybe it's a job, maybe it's a certain college they want to go to, maybe they want to move to the mountains. The vision for what life is just has to be bigger than the pain inside for them to want to move towards it.
That's amazing. Okay, so what is and I'm saying right now, everybody needs to read this book, because everybody knows a teen, loves a teen, teaches a teen, has a teen living next door. It doesn't matter. Read the book, share the episode. That's a no-brainer. But what is your wish when you wrote the book? When you closed the last chapter, you finished, signed off, sent it off. What would you say you would think, I just want my reader to?
I just want my reader to understand that parents go first, that it is a parent's job to know how they feel, have some intention in how they respond, and have responsibility for their own healing and their own behaviors, because this is going to make their teen's life better, but it's going to make their lives better too. So my goal is always healing ripples around the world, but it starts with yourself. And that's what I would want my reader to know, is that if you're ready to do the work, if you're ready to feel better and do better, start here.
Such a good answer. I knew it would be. Katie, tell everybody where to find you. I'm going to put the links to the book in the show notes, but tell everybody where to find you, how to work with you, all the good Katie things.
Yeah, so I have a lot of different resources for parents, for professionals, for teen counseling. The best place to find them under one roof is katiekmay.com. You'll find all my brands, access to free resources. It'll link you out to free chapters and free courses and things like that. So that's the best place to start.
Love it. Thank you. This has really been an important conversation. I know we have something here called Kids Helpline. I'm actually doing some training for, and the number of calls that come through, well, it's texting arena, but the number of calls, everyone, needs to be aware of this if they have any kind of kid in their life, of course, but educators, parents, aunts and uncles, grandparents, whatever. Like it's something that, we can't just brush under the rug. It's way too prevalent. It's just a tsunami right now, and it needs to be looked after. So I really appreciate this conversation, and I'd like to talk again sometime, because I think I could just dive in a little deeper even more. So thank you so much. Thank you, Katie May, and thank you, listeners, for listening and sharing your time with us for these important conversations. Please share, download, subscribe, all the things. It just gets this show out to the people who need to hear it. And thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode. I just wanted to share something with you because, parenting teens is not just about managing these challenges that we talk about on all the episodes. It's also about evolving alongside them. And I'm Cheryl, and not only the host of this podcast, but I'm also the creator of Insight to Impact Coaching and Consulting. And I help you, moms of teens, reconnect with your true selves so you can lead with purpose. You can parent with clarity. You can create stronger, more meaningful relationships with your kids. Because here's the truth. The transformation starts with you. Together, we will break free from the stress and overwhelm. We will rediscover your power. We will create the life and the family dynamic you always dreamed of. If you're ready to start this journey, let's do it. You might just not recognize your life in the next 90 days. It all starts with a call. There's no pitch. There's no pressure. It's just a call to see if I can help. We'll talk about your goals. We'll talk about what's making you feel stuck and what might be getting in your way. And everything you need to connect with me is in the show notes. Again, I'm Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me here on Parenting Teens, advice redefined for today's complex world, and the creator of Insight to Impact Coaching and Consulting. Have a great day.